Hey TCS TV viewers, it's Dave from the camera store, and today we're talking about the Tamron 150-500. Let's talk about the range of this lens. This is a 150-500mm lens, and anytime I get my hands on a 500mm lens, the first thing I want to shoot is wildlife, because those critters are so tough to get close to, and a 500mm lens gives me a really good opportunity and the chance to get some good shots. Now we've come to a great place called Inglewood Bird Sanctuary, which is just outside of downtown Calgary, and is a really nice place to photograph some wildlife. I've had this lens for a couple weeks now, so it's not my first trip down to the bird sanctuary with it. But before we get into the results of that, let's talk about the lens itself. When I first got my hands on this lens, there's a few things that really stood out. And first was the size and the weight, and also some of the features on this lens itself. Now, as far as weight goes, we're looking at about 2 kilograms or about 4 pounds, so it has some heft to it for sure. We're looking at about 20 centimeters long or about 8 inches when it's fully retracted, and that's without the lens hood, of course. Now, I do like that they do have an included lens hood that has a rubber seal on the one end, which allows you to put the lens down face first without having to worry about damaging any of the plastic. The zoom ring itself is nice and smooth, and I really appreciate that they've left it at a very short throw. I think you're looking at 75 degrees between 150 to 500, which allows you to frame your shots very quickly. And when you're out shooting wildlife, you never know what you're going to see so quickly. It's nice to be able to one hand take the entire range of that motion. The other trick feature about this lens is that I can lock the zoom ring at any focal length. So if I want to reproduce shots constantly or always shoot at the same focal length, I can do that quite easily with this lens. As much as I like this feature, I was worried I'd be locking in at different focal lengths while I was zooming, but I found I rarely ever did, so it wasn't an issue at all. The other thing we have is a whole series of switches here. We do, of course, have the usual autofocus and manual focus switch. We have a focus limiting switch, which is nice if I know my subject's in a certain range. We also have the vibration control that's on or off, as well as a vibration control mode. Here we have mode 1, which is general purpose stabilization, so it's going to compensate for every direction constantly. What you see through the viewfinder is a nice stabilized image. Mode 2 is designed for panning, so if I'm following birds in flight, this is a great option because it's not trying to compensate for my own action. Mode 3 is for framing priority, and vibration control is not on, so I don't see a stabilized image when I'm looking through the viewfinder. It only stabilizes at the moment of exposure. Today I've been primarily using mode 1 and mode 2. Mode 3, when I'm using it, I don't have a stabilized image to look through, and with a 500mm lens, it's a fair amount of camera shake going on, which I find rather distracting. We also have a lock switch, so when I'm at 150 walking around with this lens, I can lock it in at that. And I wish they took a page from the Fuji 70-300 that I can simply twist the zoom to unlock it. With this lens, I physically have to unlock it to make use of it. The last part of the lens I want to talk about is the tripod collar. Now, Tamron has done an excellent job with this. They've included an Arca-Swiss plate built into the foot, and also the ability to attach additional straps to the side of this tripod collar, freeing up the plate, so if I want to put onto a tripod, I don't have to take the straps off. One of my go-to items on a shoot like this with any long lens is this WH100 from Wimberley. This attaches to any monopod and basically takes your long lenses and makes them weightless, but gives you all the flexibility and freedom of a gimbal. Another thing I really appreciate about this lens is its working range. Now, I'm primarily using it on the longer side of things as the birds seem a little bit scared of me for some reason. I don't understand why. But 150mm on the wide side of things still allows me to get some nice sort of architectural details and some landscape kind of shots. But even more versatile for me is its minimum focusing distance. At 150mm, I can focus down to 0.6 meters, or it's about 20 inches. This allows me to get some great detail shots of flowers or anything else I come across on my walks, and just adds to the versatility of this lens. Now, when it comes to autofocus motors and design, linear autofocus is the latest and greatest. Now, Sony has one as well in their 200 to 600mm lens, which in my opinion is probably the closest competitor to this lens. Now, how do they compete side by side? Take a look at these two examples here, and you'll see head to head, they both compete very, very favorably, and it's really tough to tell which one is the better performer. When it it comes to the image quality that a lens can produce, there are a whole bunch of factors we look for. Certainly sharpness is going to be number one, but we're also looking for how well it handles chromatic aberration, how well it handles vignetting, and things like focus breathing. And I'm happy to report that this lens is very well controlled on a lot of those aspects. Take a look at this example here, how well it handles chromatic aberration as I put it through kind of a torture test with one of the masts on these sailboats here, right into the sun, and you can see as you zoom in, there's very little chromatic aberration at all. Really well controlled, and it's a pleasure to see that. The one thing I did find with this lens though, when shooting into bright lights, you would often get a little bit of flare. Take a look at this example here of these girls performing on stage, and you'll see that effect. So this lens is optically well corrected for a bunch of different factors, but ultimately we want sharpness. And I'm happy to report that this lens produces some very good quality results. Take a look at these examples here of how I'm able to pull out the detail around the duck's eyes. I'm finding that the results I'm getting from this are very similar to what I'm able to produce with the Sony 200-600mm lens. So where does this lens fit into the marketplace? It's relatively crowded actually in the Sony world right now. We have the very cool Sony 200-600mm lens, which I quite like, although it is all internal zooming, making it a significantly bigger lens, which might impact how you have to carry these lenses around. It does have more aperture blades, so you're going to have a little creamier background blur with that lens, although you don't have an Arca-Swiss compatible foot, but there is an aftermarket one you can get. So all these things kind of go back and forth. We also have Sony's very good 100-400 G Master lens, but it's twice the price, and it doesn't give you quite the reach. On the other end of the scale, we have the Sigma 100-400, which is a very good lens in its own right. However, it doesn't give you as much reach, and it doesn't have a tripod collar. That's an optional accessory to pick up. So I think this lens is priced fairly. The results I'm getting out of it are fantastic, and I like the features and functions of it. Little touches they put onto it, like the tripod collar ring, being able to put a strap on it, like my Peak Design carrier strap here, plus being able to have an Arca-Swiss compatible plate. I think all tripod feet should have an Arca-Swiss compatible plate on there. I don't know why they don't. I also do find myself using the zoom lock on this lens more than I thought. This way I don't have to worry about rechanging my framing. It just stays where it is all the time. And it's very well implemented. Little touches like the rubber on the end of the hood allow me to put it down. Overall, this lens gives me great optics, nice sharp images, well thought out lens design, all in a very economical package when you look at the rest of the market. Overall, I want to know what you guys think of this lens. Is this something that you would want to pick up and add to your kit? Would you take this over top of the 200-600, or is there another option on the market that you would prefer? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Follow us both on Instagram, and please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We'll catch you again next time. Guys like looking at me like, fuck off. Hey, thanks for sticking around. If you want to check out more of our recent content, click up here. And if you're Canadian, you want to shop local, check out thecamerastore.com down here.